I'm Veronica Hale, a marriage and family therapist. And today, I want to tell you a true story, one about trust, betrayal, and the price we pay when we deceive someone who once believed in us unconditionally. This story comes from Ethan Carter, a 42-year-old IT engineer from Arkansas. Ethan and his wife, Laura, had been together for 16 years. Laura had a son from a previous relationship, and Ethan raised the boy as his own since he was just 2 years old. They lived in a small house in the suburbs of Little Rock, a simple, warm home filled with laughter and peaceful dinners. But sometimes the quiet in a home isn't peace, it's the calm before the storm. A silence that slowly grows between two people, until one day, it's too big to ignore. Ethan told me that a few months before everything fell apart, Laura started to change. She said she had to work late because her company was short-staffed. Then the late nights became more frequent, once, twice, then 3 or 4 times a week. At first, he believed her. After all, who wants to doubt the person they love? But soon, he began to notice small things. Laura started putting on more makeup, wearing a new perfume, and coming home in an unusually good mood, not like someone who had just worked a 12-hour shift. Ethan worked in tech. He understood how people hide things, and his instincts began to whisper that something was wrong. I still remember his voice when he spoke to me. "Veronica, I don't understand why she chose that path. I wasn't a bad husband. I just wanted honesty." Love, when it's no longer nurtured by presence and genuine listening, slowly gets replaced by illusions, secret conversations, and glances that make us feel desired again. But that kind of desire, if misplaced, can become a blade that cuts through someone's trust. And Laura, in the moment she lost herself, didn't realize that the husband she betrayed was the very man who would know exactly how to uncover the truth. This story, as you'll see, isn't just about infidelity. It's a lesson about the limits of trust and the consequences of underestimating the person who once loved you with their whole heart. About 8 months before everything fell apart, Ethan began to notice small changes. Laura often said she had to stay late at the office to finish reports because the project was urgent. At first, he believed her. He'd always trusted his wife. But when the late nights became routine, 3, 4 times a week, that trust quietly turned into doubt, the kind of doubt no one wants to admit. He told me the changes didn't happen overnight. They were subtle, so small he thought he was imagining things. Laura started paying more attention to her appearance. She woke up earlier than usual, spent more time in front of the mirror, picked new dresses, tried new perfumes, and smiled at her reflection before leaving the house. And what unsettled Ethan the most was that every time she came home late, she was happy, not tired, not complaining about stress or deadlines. Instead, she was full of energy, as if she'd just returned from a place that made her feel more alive than her own home ever did. Ethan wasn't the suspicious type. He was calm, kind, and principled. He believed in things that could be proven: data, evidence, numbers. But love doesn't follow logic. And intuition. That was the only kind of data his heart had left to rely on. "I didn't want to doubt her," Ethan told me, "but something inside me wouldn't rest. Like a quiet voice that kept whispering, 'Something's not right.'" He started to notice everything. The message notifications that Laura quickly silenced, the short phone calls where her voice dropped softer than usual. Once, when he offered to pick her up after work, Laura just smiled faintly and said, "Don't bother, I'll be really busy tonight." "I'll probably be home late." It sounded harmless, ordinary even. But to Ethan, that sentence was like a tiny crack in the wall of trust they had built over 16 years. On the outside, he stayed quiet and gentle. But inside, he began to pull back, to watch, to wait, and to wonder. Was he still living in the truth, or just in the version of it Laura wanted him to believe? And from that moment on, the peace between them began to fade, not with shouting or fights, but with the silence of someone slowly losing faith. Ethan wasn't a man who lost his temper easily. Working in technology had taught him one thing: every action leaves a trace. The question is whether you're patient enough to find it. And in his marriage, he applied that same mindset: no confrontation, no accusations, just quiet observation, like a man collecting data. By day, Ethan was a disciplined, detail-oriented IT engineer, a man who lived by logic and routine. By night, he worked part-time as a security guard at a nightclub, a place where people shed their masks and their true instincts came out. He had seen men pretending to be faithful, women hiding guilty glances in the dark corners of the club. Ethan understood that when people hide something, they don't change completely. They only change the smallest habits. And Laura was changing hers, one by one. She started leaving her phone on her desk, saying it helped her focus when she got home. She put it on silent mode, disabled message previews, and deleted her call history every day. It was subtle, discreet enough for most people not to notice. But for someone like Ethan, those were signals. He began checking everything: phone bills, GPS data, emails, messages. Nothing. Not a single trace. She was careful, meticulously careful. She was smart, almost too smart. A part of him wanted to believe he was overthinking it, that his doubts were just paranoia. But another part, the one built on intuition and years of cybersecurity experience, whispered, "No one erases every trace that perfectly, unless they have something to hide." And that was the moment Ethan switched modes, no longer the doubtful husband, but a man quietly preparing to uncover the truth. He didn't want to hurt her. He didn't want to become the paranoid one. But he knew. Sometimes truth doesn't reveal itself when you ask for it. It shows itself when you're quiet enough to notice. So Ethan began to plan, not to catch her, but to save the last bit of trust he had left in himself. He told me the idea came to him one perfectly ordinary evening. Laura had just come home from yet another overtime shift, complaining that someone had scratched her car in the parking lot. He smiled gently and said, "Let me install a dash cam for you. That way, if someone hits your car again, we'll have proof." Laura was delighted. She thought it was just another thoughtful gesture, her caring, dependable husband trying to protect her. But behind that gentle smile, Ethan was already building a quiet, meticulous plan. He bought a dual-channel dashcam, one that recorded both front and rear views, and, most importantly, one that could keep filming even when the engine was off, if it detected motion. He installed it carefully, adjusted the angles, made sure it blended in. To anyone else, it looked like a regular smart rear-view mirror. But to Ethan, it was the eye of truth. He even set up an automatic backup system. Every time the car returned home, the footage was silently uploaded to his phone and computer. No alerts, no notifications. Everything happened quietly, just like the way Ethan was living those days. He said that during the first week, he found nothing unusual. Just hours of footage showing Laura driving to work, parking, and coming home. Ethan almost wanted to believe he was wrong, that this was all just the paranoia of a man who had seen too many betrayals in the world around him. But then came the second week, and the truth finally began to surface. One evening, Laura texted him saying she'd be working late. The project deadline, she said, was close. Ethan simply nodded and said nothing. The next morning, he opened the dashcam footage, and his heart stopped. Laura had left the office at 5 p.m., not 9 p.m., as she claimed. She drove to an empty parking lot, pulled into a shadowed corner, and a pickup truck arrived a few minutes later. A man stepped out, walked to her window, and they kissed. Just 10 seconds. But 10 seconds were enough to shatter 16 years of love, trust, and illusion. Ethan turned off the video and sat there, in silence, for a very long time. When Ethan saw his reflection in the laptop screen, he no longer saw the calm, analytical IT engineer he had always been, but a man who had just come face to face with a kind of pain called the truth. In the days that followed, Ethan barely slept. He told me there were nights when he just sat alone in his office, staring at the computer screen, replaying the same clips over and over again. Each frame, each touch, each stolen kiss felt like a knife carving deeper into his chest. But instead of screaming or confronting her, he chose silence. A silence so cold that even he began to fear the person he was becoming. The camera kept recording. 6 weeks later, Ethan had 12 videos, 12 undeniable records of betrayal, repeating the same secret pattern like clockwork. Every evening, Laura left her office around 5. Instead of going home, she always took the same detour, parking in quiet places, behind a small restaurant, near an empty park, or in front of a random apartment complex. And then, the same silver pickup truck would appear. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, confident eyes. His name was Ryan Blake, a site supervisor at the same company where Laura worked. They talked, laughed, held hands, and kissed. Every single time. There was no ambiguity left. No way to say we're just friends. Each kiss, each lingering touch, was a fact that couldn't be denied. Ethan saved everything. He organized the files, numbered them, labeled each with the exact date, time, and location. He was methodical, almost clinical. He wasn't the heartbroken husband anymore. He had become the investigator. He told me that when he rewatched those clips later, he no longer cried. The pain had burned itself out, replaced by clarity, a cold, cutting calm, as if his heart, once set on fire, had finally turned to ash. Ethan knew it was over, not because Laura had betrayed him, but because he had seen the truth with his own eyes. And once you've seen the truth, love can never return the same way again. When he finally held all the evidence, the videos, the timestamps, the locations, Ethan realized there was nothing left to guess. But he didn't want drama. He didn't want shouting, accusations, or to turn their home into a battlefield. He only wanted one thing: justice. I still remember the way he spoke to me, calm, steady, almost chilling. I don't need her apology. I just need everything to be clear and to end. Ethan went to see a lawyer. He laid out each piece of evidence, the videos, the notes, every detail he had recorded with quiet precision. The lawyer looked up after watching the footage and said just one sentence: "You have a flawless case." In the state of Arkansas, where they lived, the law allows divorce on the grounds of adultery. That means if one spouse is proven to have cheated, the court can divide the assets unequally, not the usual 50-50 split. And in this case, every piece of evidence pointed squarely to Ethan. Undeniable, irrefutable. But Ethan didn't file right away. He took a few more days, not to reconsider his pain, but to make sure he was doing the right thing. He looked at Laura, the woman who once meant everything to him, now a stranger sharing the same walls. There were nights when she still sat on the couch, smiling and asking about his work, while he already knew everything. And he stayed silent, because sometimes silence is the harshest punishment of all. Then one morning, Ethan walked into his lawyer's office and signed the papers. No anger, no bitterness, just an ending. He handed everything over to the law, believing one simple truth: if I react with emotion, I lose. But if I react with truth, she's the one who'll face the consequences. And just like that, a 16-year marriage began to unravel, not because of a fight, but because of the truth, recorded by the very hands that once trusted her completely. The court hearing was quiet, almost uneventful. Laura didn't even show up. She had already signed the settlement papers, perhaps knowing that any attempt to fight the evidence would be pointless. On the judge's desk, Ethan's lawyer laid out everything: short video clips, neatly labeled notes detailing dates, times, locations. Each piece of evidence was like a blade cutting through whatever pride Laura had left. In the end, the court ruled Ethan would keep 75% of the assets. The house, the one they'd filled with laughter, the one whose walls he had repainted 3 times because Laura kept changing her mind, was now entirely his. The retirement account, his. most of the savings, his. Laura left with her old car, a few personal belongings, and just over $30,000 in cash. To an outsider, that might sound like a decent sum, but after 16 years of marriage, promises, and countless quiet nights together, it felt more like a settlement paid to the truth. Laura packed in silence. Ethan told me that on the day she left, it rained. She didn't cry. She simply set the house keys on the kitchen counter, then said, so softly he almost didn't hear it, "I never thought you could actually do this." Ethan replied just as softly, "You once thought I'd never find out." No shouting, no blame, just two adults standing in the wreckage of what used to be trust. Laura left with her son, the 18-year-old boy Ethan had raised as his own. He didn't stop them. He simply watched them go, understanding that sometimes even fatherly love has to leave with the mother. A few months later, he heard that Laura and Ryan had broken up. No surprise, no satisfaction, because Ethan knew any relationship built on betrayal is already built to fall apart. And in the end, Ethan was left alone with a silent house. But it was the kind of silence that felt like freedom, the peace of a man who had walked through the storm and come out standing on the other side. I asked him if he still believed in love. He smiled faintly and said, "I do. I just won't love with my eyes closed anymore." And in that moment, I knew he had finally stepped out of the shadow of betrayal. After Laura and her son left, the house became different. No more laughter, no more hurried footsteps in the morning, or the smell of weekend coffee drifting through the kitchen. Just empty rooms, quiet picture frames on the walls, and the steady hum of a ceiling fan spinning through air so still it almost hurt to breathe. Ethan told me that, at first, the silence felt like punishment. He'd walk from room to room and see everything still in its place, yet it all felt hollow, like the soul of the house had left with her. The sofa where Laura used to sit and watch movies was now covered in dust. The heart-shaped mug she gave him for their 10th anniversary still sat untouched in the cabinet. Every little object seemed to whisper the same truth. Something once real and beautiful had existed here and was now gone. But as time passed, the pain began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. He realized he no longer had to live in suspicion. No more wondering where she was. No more checking messages or looking for evidence. The house was empty, but honest. And to Ethan, that honesty was freedom. "I lost a wife," he told me, "but I got myself back." Some nights, he still opened the old videos, not to torture himself, but to remind himself of something deeper. The truth may hurt you, but lies kill you slowly. Ethan began repainting the living room, hung new curtains, changed the color of the walls. Not to erase the past, but to begin again, in a space that no longer held anyone's shadow but his own. And I believe that in that emptiness, Ethan found something far more precious than love itself: peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you finally start living truthfully. When I listened to Ethan tell his story, I didn't just see an affair. I saw a familiar portrait, the quiet fractures that run through so many modern marriages. I've met many people like Laura. They don't cheat because they've stopped loving. They cheat because they want to feel loved again. After years of marriage, they're no longer the person who's desired. They become the stable partner, part of the routine, part of the bills, part of the daily grind. And when a new gaze or a kind word comes along, they mistake it for love. When in truth, it's just a wounded soul craving recognition. Laura wasn't cruel. She was weak. And Ethan wasn't cold. He was too rational. He loved through responsibility, through care, through consistent action, but forgot that love also needs to be heard and felt, not just seen. Between them, love didn't die because of betrayal. It died long before that, the day they stopped truly talking to each other. I once told Ethan, "She didn't betray you because you weren't enough. She betrayed you because she wasn't strong enough to face herself." Some people don't fall into another person's arms because they're seduced. They do it because they can't bear the silence inside their own marriage. They want to escape, but don't have the courage to leave. They want to live, but don't have the honesty to stay faithful. But no matter the reason, betrayal is still a choice, and every choice carries a consequence, because no one can build their happiness on the ruins of someone else's trust. Laura gave up everything just to feel wanted again, but in the end, the only thing she found was emptiness, and the bitter truth that desire is never worth more than honesty. There's one thing that still haunts me from Ethan's story. He told me that one night, long before everything fell apart, when they were still happy, Laura once said to him, "You'll never doubt me. You trust me completely." At the time, it sounded like a declaration of love. But when everything ended, those words became a double-edged blade. It was because he trusted her completely that the wound cut so deep. When we place our whole heart in someone's hands, we also give them the power to break it. Trust is the foundation of every relationship, but blind trust is the fastest road to tragedy. Trust doesn't mean closing your eyes. It's a conscious choice, the decision to believe, even after you've seen someone clearly for who they are. Ethan trusted completely, so completely that he stopped being cautious. And when that trust collapsed, it didn't just destroy his marriage, it forced him to relearn how to trust another human being from the very beginning. Yet amid the wreckage, Ethan held on to something vital: his composure. He didn't rage, didn't shout, didn't break what was left. He chose strategic silence, not the silence of weakness, but the silence of a man who knows that the truth will speak for itself. And that's what made him win. Had Ethan confronted Laura too soon, she would have denied everything, covered her tracks, and the truth might have stayed buried forever. But he waited. He watched. He let the truth reveal itself, piece by piece, through the cold, unblinking lens of a camera. I always tell the people who come to me for help, don't rush to accuse someone when your heart is trembling. Feelings can blind you, but evidence never lies. And in Ethan's story, it wasn't anger that saved him. It was the truth. Truth was his anchor in the storm of betrayal. None of us are perfect. We love, and we get hurt. We trust, and we get disappointed. But maturity doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from looking straight at it and walking forward anyway. Laura lost everything, not because she was punished, but because she betrayed the one thing that matters most in a marriage: honesty. Ethan lost much, too. He lost the woman he loved, 16 years of his life, and the son he once called his own. But within that loss, he found something most people spend a lifetime searching for. The truth may hurt you, but lies will kill you slowly, day by day. The story of Ethan and Laura isn't meant to judge. It's a reminder that trust isn't something we're entitled to. It's something we earn, nurture, and protect. And once it's gone, it rarely comes back the same. If you're in a relationship, nurture it with presence, with listening, with honest conversations, no matter how uncomfortable they are. And if you're healing from betrayal, remember, it isn't the end of your story. Sometimes, what breaks apart isn't a failure. It's the beginning of finding your way back to yourself, stronger, wiser, and more truthful than ever before. I'm Veronica Hale, and this is Love and Lies TV, where we explore the hidden corners of love, not to judge, but to understand and to heal. If you've ever been through something similar, share your story in the comments below. I read them all, and I listen, always. Do you believe trust can be rebuilt after betrayal? Tell me what you think. And if this story resonated with you, hit like, share, and subscribe to Love and Lies TV. Because who knows, the story you heard today might just help someone out there find the courage to live and love truthfully again.